this is something inspired by your talk. And I encourage everybody to go to your podcast and listen to it attentively, your last podcast, because you talk there why it's sometimes important to take a break from work, and you share your life experience. Incredible things you had to go through, from passing your dad, the health struggle. And when you said something that for me was mind blowing, taking action from the place of exhaustion always lead to resentment. So being aware of that, which so rarely we are, and so rarely this is being discussed. If you'd be so kind to expand on that.
Sure. More than happy to. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, Kristof, that podcast has been my most popular one. Of the 127 episodes I think there has been, that one has had the most response. And I'm not sure it's because James is taking a pause and we don't need to hear from him anymore, or whether it really resonated with people. And I think it is the latter.
You create demand.
Yeah. And I reached a point where I was resenting my work schedule, and I'm blessed, Kristof, in that, I'm doing work that I love. And, if I was lucky to win the lotto, I would continue to do this work once I'd had a bit of a splurge, along the way. And I'd fallen out of love with my work, and that's not being of service to clients, and it wasn't being of service to me. And I was just tired. I was just tired. And there had been, several years of health issues with me. My dad died from pancreatic cancer, and that was a year-long process. You throw in the pandemic on top of that. There was various other bits and pieces going on, and you're trying to keep a business on the go as well. And it was just overwhelmed, and I need rest. And I came across a great TED Talk that spoke about the different types of rest that we all need, not just the physical rest, but mental rest, emotional rest. Because those of us who work maybe in a caring profession, we're there giving all the time. And if the cup is empty, there's nothing to give to people anymore. And even say sensory rest, where we're bombarded by information and messages and social media and consumerism and news and all of that. And I just needed to press pause. And I was fortunate that I was able to facilitate that for me. Now, I've called it a practical sabbatical because it's very difficult sometimes just to stop. And, we have to keep the roof over the head, etc. But I've called it a practical sabbatical. And it was almost like making the decision that I can move down the gears a little bit. I don't need to be in fifth gear all the time. I found that really helpful. But it also got me thinking as well of, say, clients that I've worked with over the years who, either find themselves in career transition, if I use that phrase, because they've consciously made a choice to step out of or step off a career ladder that they've been on, to reassess maybe where they're at. I often say to them, sometimes you have to climb a career ladder, to have a certain height so you can look around and see the terrain and the environment and your learnings, etc. So your patterns and tendencies and desires can be clearer. But I've also worked with many people who find themselves in career transition or on a career break where they didn't proactively choose it. They were let go, or their company went under, and they found themselves in circumstances that they didn't expect. And obviously, if you choose to take a break, you feel a little bit more in control, as opposed to a break being imposed upon you. But what I found with patterns of working with clients over the years, that when they accept the reality, that they're in a transition or that they're on a career break, as I think Byron Katie, who says, if you argue with reality, you will lose. So if you accept the reality that I'm on a career break here, we'll often recover or resource ourselves more quickly than we will think, because we're not wasting energy fighting against being let go or fighting against circumstances that we didn't want to be in, or that victimhood approach to us. to it. Now, that doesn't mean we're not taking proactive action where required, but we're doing it in a much more conscious or proactive way. It's not reactionary, if that makes sense. So what I've often shared with people who find themselves on a break is, you obviously need to do some self-care here, that more recent, I won't say phenomenon because it's so vital, but the whole thing around well-being and self-care, and looking after ourselves so that we have something to give to other people. It's that old cliche, Kristof, of putting your own oxygen mask on first. But when we allow ourselves to pause, then maybe we can ask ourselves, questions such as, well, what's next for me? Or what do I want my working life to do for me? Or, what do I want the next chapter to be for me? I think you can only contemplate those big questions when we have paused, when we're a little bit more comfortable with silence, and maybe when we can pay attention to some of those little whispering voices that we hear, the little nudges and the prods of try this, go there, investigate that. And that's certainly what I have found over the last few weeks with myself when I've taken my foot off the pedal a little. I was quite exhausted. I did a lot of sleeping. I do feel more resourced and a little bit more myself, I would have to say. Like I feel a bit more like myself again and less lost. Which was a very disconcerting feeling. But then what I found very quickly was some of the things that I love to do, I had an appetite for them again. I was about 70% through the new book that we spoke about earlier, and I had sort of lost the impetus of spending time with it. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And thankfully, I know that if you're not enjoying something like that, it's not going to be any good. But taking the pause then means I'm going back to it with fresh eyes, Kristof, and a new sense of creativity and renewed positivity as well, which I think is required in the nature of my work. But I think it's something that we can all relate to as well. So that podcast, it's the last one that's there because I was used to producing weekly podcasts, which became so much of a burden as well. It's like, no, I'm pausing for a few weeks. It will be back in the springtime with a new series, but the podcast, which touches on a lot of the topics we spoke about here in more detail, is Your Time with James Sweetman, as you mentioned. And of course, it's available on all platforms and also on my website.
Perfect. James, that's such a great information because what I've noticed is being aware, that's the first thing, that you resent something, and this resentment, they're very sneaky. They're gently coming in because you want to do so much. And then being honest with yourself, okay, I'm putting myself too much things that I love, too much of them. And being honest that you resent them and you need a break or you need to change your routine. That is so important. And I'm so happy that you say about this honestly and openly, and you can help clients because it's not easy to spot.
No, because we associate not doing with laziness, whereas in reality, not doing is like less doing is more being. And of course, we're human beings. We're not human doings. And one of the question constructs that I have found really helpful in that area myself in the last little while is, am I doing this from a place of worthiness, or am I doing this to prove my worthiness? Which links back to imposter syndrome. So am I doing this from a place of worthiness? The latter, that's exhausting.
Perfect. James, thank you for that.
Feel free to join our LinkedIn group. Hopefully I will see you soon. Thank you.